Okay, hi, I'm Mignon Millwood. I'm one of 3 sisters that are on this tour together. This is my sister.
Hi, I'm Susan Bleeden. I'm the middle of the 3 sisters. When we heard that Hugh was doing this tour to Lithuania, all 3 of us separately responded and let the other 2 know that this tour was happening, because we were all so excited to come to Lithuania to try and discover our roots. Our Boba, dear old soul, sweet little lady that she was, she really didn't speak very much about her life in Lithuania. And my father spoke in bits and pieces. We had to try and put the pieces together. I had this image of a little boy in a hat with shorts in a street in Kovna, another one sitting on a beach in Kovna, on a bench in Kovna, but we really wanted to come see whether we could discover something more about his past. And certainly what I've discovered and the experiences we've been through has helped me and given me a far better understanding of who my father really was and why he used to get so emotional every time we sang Hatikva or every time he benched us. He left Europe and had no surviving family other than his parents, and he valued so much having built up a family with children and grandchildren that every time any occasion came and he uttered Shekianu, he would just start crying. I now understand him far better than I did before we came.
So what actually happened was, when we realized that we were going to be coming back to the country and the city where he lived, that I really put aside a lot of time in order to try and investigate and try to find out a little bit about Kovna, which is the place where he was born. And he lived there with both his parents until just before he was 2, when his father decided it was time to leave the country, and the father left to go to South Africa. And at that point in time, my father moved to a little village called Vilkavishkis, which is about 38 miles from Kovna, and he went to stay with his great-grandmother. Now, when my father, as Susan mentioned, didn't really talk very much about his childhood, but one thing he always spoke about was he really would like to know, he would love to have known what had happened to 3 of his aunts and one of his cousins, a little girl who I think was about, who he had never met. He left the country in 1932, and his cousin was born in 1936. He always yearned to know what had happened to them. So at that point in time, when I actually realized we were coming, I decided I was going to investigate as much as I could about my father's beginnings.
The one aunt's name was Devora, and Mignon is named Minna Devora after Auntie Devora, who perished in the Holocaust.
And other sisters, one of the other sisters' names was Susanna or Shoshana, and Susan's named after her. So we definitely have some sort of connection to them.
Interestingly enough, Shoshana was a dentist and I'm a doctor, so I feel an even closer connection considering we were both in the scientific field.
So I sat for many hours trying to investigate on the computer, try to find out. I eventually found a site called Jewish Genealogy, and sorry, just a slight pause. Sorry, I just need to clarify that what happened was my father was born in Kovna, and he was in Kovna until just under the age of 2, and at that point in time his father left South Africa to start a new life, and my dad and his mother moved in with my grandmother for the next probably about 4 years, until such time as they actually left to join my grandfather, my Zayda, in South Africa. As I said, I went on to Jewish genealogy and I found the most incredible things. One of the things I found on Jewish genealogy was that my great-grandmother had not died in the war, perished in the Holocaust as I had thought she had, but that she had actually passed away before my father and his mom left for South Africa. And what I actually found in Jewish genealogy was an actual picture of her gravestone in Vilkavishkis. which I found incredibly exciting, because that actually gave me something to look forward to when we were coming to Lithuania. Then it was quite incredible that just before a week, we were leaving on the Tuesday to come to Lithuania, and on the Thursday night, I was actually looking at a site on the computer, which I'd probably looked at 10 to 15 times before, and I hadn't actually picked up that there was an email address for a gentleman called Ralph Salin, I can't remember his surname, sorry, that had actually, his parents had come from Vilkovic. In fact, he was born in Vilkovic himself, and he had gone back, and he was the one that had actually discovered the cemetery, discovered the graves in the cemetery, and he was in the process of organizing a whole lot of memorial plaques and various plaques to go up around Vilkovic, which would would indicate where all the mass killing occurred, and he's done a hell of a lot in Vilkovic. So Sue, do you want to take over from there?
Okay, so let's start prior to our visit to Vilkovic. Well, okay, we're at Vilkovic. So we arranged a driver to take us down to Vilkovic, and when we got there, we had an address where we believed our great-grandmother had lived, together with my Boba, their daughter, and my father, for the time period that they were in Vilkovic.
So can I just butt in there? What I actually didn't say is from this gentleman in Israel, in Kfar Rupen, he had actually sent me a hand-drawn map that someone had drawn of Vilkovic in the 1930s. And what he also did was he enlarged a certain section of the map, which is that there, where he had actually written, where it was actually had given me an address that where my dad had gone to stay with his grandmother was 29 Kostusha Street, and over there was 29 Kostusha Street, and on the map the woman that had actually drawn it had actually written the name of the people that lived in the street, and I could actually see there that it actually said Lupovsky, that they had actually stayed at that address, which was the most phenomenal discovery.
So when we arrived in Vilkovic, we walked down the street and saw two old ladies sitting on a bench. And in true Lithuanian Kulta Litvak style, we walked up to them, or our guide did, and he asked them whether they knew this address. So they thought and they pondered, and they said, they'll show us where it is, but it's not the same house. The house is the same, but the number has changed. And they took us to the house, and they said that was the Jewish house. And it was quite incredible. There stood the house. We hadn't really seen photographs, but there stood a house which was called the Jewish house, all barred up. True style, Mignon jumped over the fence to try and see what she could find in the backyard. She even found a vacuum cleaner similar to the one she used.
A modern one, a very modern one.
Okay, so that was the first find in Vilkovic. We then asked our guide to take us to the Jewish cemetery. So he said the Jewish one, the old one or the new one? So we said the new one. So he first took us to a cemetery where he delivered us, and we walked around. It was clear that was a Goyish cemetery. There was not one single Jewish kever there. We then went back to the car and told him we want the Jewish cemetery. So we drove and drove and drove for about an hour.
Before that, he was adamant. He said, no, the Jewish cemetery is the same as the Christian cemetery. They were buried together. And he was really keen on us going back into that same cemetery and to carry on looking. And there was just no chance. I knew that was incorrect information. So
off we went along to one cemetery, followed by another cemetery, followed by an area of mass grave. And we were getting more and more frustrated because we knew there was something else that we weren't quite finding. Eventually, he took us to a place where we said, but we told you to go there. That says Jewish cemetery. It's got a sign that it's a Jewish cemetery.
It says the Z-U-D-U, the Judu.
Anyhow, in we walked and we all started exploring, and then suddenly Mignon called, I found it. And there it was, looking exactly as it looked in the picture. So, here comes the adventure. Mignon had brought her handy Andy in a little bottle with water and a clean cloth, and she brought a Yortzeit candle, and she brought a picture of my great-grandmother and great-grandfather, followed by a picture of my Boba, my father, and then a branching off to a picture of all of us, the whole family, on my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, which was the last time that our whole family were complete prior to this one going to seminary and that one going to yeshiva and this one going on Kfar Haroeh. And there we put that picture up on the grave and we said, Boba, we are uniting you with your family. Unfortunately, there were no pictures of the great-grandchildren. Baruch Hashem, there are many great-grandchildren now. But we took our handy Andy and we tried to clean off the grave. And then Mignon had also attached a tefillah to this page. And we lit the Yortzeit candle and Mignon said the tefillah in English. And it was actually a very emotional moment, reuniting with this great Boba who we hadn't known. And
we knew nothing about until 6 weeks ago.
June, the third sister, said, guys, do you realize this great Boba is as close to us as Mommy's granny was, and we grew up with Mommy's granny. So it was actually a very special moment of being reunited. And what it said on the kever was... it said, our dear mother, straight and modest, our teacher, and her name, Hena Malka, daughter of Israel Shalom, wife of Reb Chaim, Zichrono Livracha, Lipovsky, who passed away, Isru Chag HaSukkot, and then the year 1932. And these characteristics of being tsanua and real, what was the word, Mignon? Straight.
Yes,
were the very characteristics that my father had, and the very characteristics that we all wrote on his matzeva when we had to do the wording.
Very similar.
So I felt like the generations were really uniting because the characteristics of the great Boba had come directly through to our father, Chaim Ber. So that was a very special moment in time for us. We then came back to join the rest of the group. Now, the night prior to that, we were walking down the street in Kovna, and we had this postcard.
Well, it's a postcard with a picture of my Zayda on. And I've been trying to get these people to actually translate the Yiddish at the back of the postcard, which I struggled. Just no one could understand it. In fact, eventually when I found someone, they turned around and said that the actual writing was German. And they tried to translate it, but were unable to do so. On the first night that we arrived, on Wednesday night, I approached Zulik, our tour guide, and I said to him, won't you do me a favor, won't you please look at this postcard and just tell me if you can see an address on here. And he just glanced at it, and he automatically immediately says, yes, of course there's an address there. How it had actually been written was Sonia Klugman, which was obviously my Boba's name. Well, not obviously, but it was the name that my Zayd had actually called her by her English name. Then it actually said Kaunas, and then the actual address was at the bottom, Lesva Street 57. So suddenly now we had an address to even look at, to find in Kovna.
The place where our father had been born. This postcard that Mignon's described was actually sent by our late grandfather to my Boba and father when they had been left behind in Lithuania and he'd already gone on to South Africa. And if you look here, there are actually a couple of franc marks. It had first gone to Latvia, and then it had gone to Kovna to find my Boba and my father. This was another special moment in time when we walked down the main street, which is now a very commercial main street in Kovna, and we actually spotted the house, and it's now a library. And that too has a lot of significance for me personally, and partly for Mignon and June, because my father loved to read, and he loved to write, and he read almost till the day he died.
In fact, how he learned English was when he arrived in South Africa, he got himself encyclopedias, and he actually used to read encyclopedias.
Yeah, knock on the door.
You see, here is more Leviticus. Right.
The
57.
name of the street's changed. No, it hasn't changed. It hasn't.
Leo, can I just